that there's a lot of inertia that's going on because a lot of the people who still control the research dollars, they have impressive CVs that weigh about 2 pounds, and they get all the grants, and they control the information because they have such impressive resumes. They can get in the top journals. They can sit in on NIH scientific review committees where they dole out the money that Congress gives them according to their discretion. It's all about control. They sit on these committees like the tick-borne working group. And, they all have since they're in their 70s, they're maybe not on the top of their research game. They have, 200 or 300 papers that say Lyme is easy to treat and cure. There's no chronic Lyme. Hey, there's no insurance code for chronic Lyme. It must not exist. And the insurance company, some of them consult with the insurance companies to deny claims of people with really expensive Lyme or tick-borne disease cases. So there's just a lot of reasons to stay the course.
That's right. Yeah. And I'd love to throw in right now the fact that I just did a recent interview with Jenna Luce-Thayer, who's a human rights expert. She Herculeaned the effort of getting 11 new ICD codes for Lyme disease approved by the World Health Organization. So we do now have 15 ICD codes for Lyme disease when we go to the doctor that eventually, hopefully, will show up in the doctor's office in their drop-down box when they don't understand what they're looking at. When they're looking at patients like you and I, they can get some assistance with diagnostic codes for what it is that they're looking at. And then patients can eventually get the insurance coverage that's passed into federal law. So that interview is really key. I just released part 2 and 3 yesterday. So that's on my YouTube channel. If you guys just type Christina Bauer, Texas Lyme Alliance, it should come up. But it's really powerful to mention that these people are going down, and they're going down hard, hopefully sooner than later. But it's all coming to light within this Tory versus IDSA, within getting more information and awareness out about the new ICD codes. Each one of those codes, I asked her, Jenna, how did you get one code, for instance, accepted formally into the World Health Organization? And she said it takes mounds upon mounds of peer-reviewed and validated studies to back that code up. You can't just, send them a letter and say, hey, we have this problem, we need a code. It's a lot of science that goes behind each one of those codes. But the congenital Lyme code was challenged by someone in Canada, and it was removed without proper process and denying the science. So we're hoping to get that reinstated. But this is an international problem. When you said in the United States earlier for our audience, this is being denied all over the world as a persistent problem that patients are left to fend for themselves and seek medical care. And then the physicians are not, in my opinion, are not at fault because they don't want to lose their licenses and be red flagged. I have Lyme doctors all the time on my personal list that I help patients find that are experienced in treating persistent Lyme symptoms, but they don't want to be advertised, and we can't talk about them, mention their names on our forums, etc. But that's all for a reason. They get red flagged, and they get harassed, and then they get written up for things like their paperwork's out of order, or never mind that they're helping cure cancer and cure Lyme disease and get rid of the hard stuff. But it seems to be very clear to me that we do need to continue to encourage new researchers to come into this field of infectious disease and continue to prove validating those studies since 1988 on congenital Lyme and persistent Lyme, that just like syphilis, it's its cousin, it exists. And we have to keep, bringing up awareness and talking about how and why and what are we going to do? What do you think patients can do to support these efforts like yours and Lisa Torrey's lawsuit, that we can start encouraging new researchers to submit for requests for those grants.
I think letters to your congressional representatives help. And,
Yes.
you know, I think we have a really good ecosystem of Lyme foundations now. They each have their own wheelhouse. The new Lyme Action Group in DC is helping with the lobbying effort, which
Center
is
for
good.
Lyme Action.
Yes,
Yeah.
Center for Lyme Action. So, you know, participating in those petitions is important. Here, you know, just letting the patient voices be heard. I like LymeDisease.org for patient information on how to fight for insurance coverage for, you know, coverage for your real disease that you need help with. And then there's just some really good research organizations too, like Bay Area Lyme Foundation and GLA, Global Lyme Alliance, are really filling in for where the NIH has failed us as far as more research on patient cures and treatments and diagnostics. So
Absolutely.
any way you can support them is good.
Yeah, whether it's financially or sharing fundraisers or, you know, people say that all the time to me, I'm too sick to help. And I always think, you know, well, you're typing to me right now.
Yeah.
You know, that's the same thing that you'll do in going to your website, your legislator's website, and just type. That's all. So whether you're cognitively challenged because of Lyme disease or fatigued or whatever those symptoms are that you're suffering from, we did too. But when you can, I try not to push people that are debilitated by this
Right.
disease, because you know it's definitely a very raw emotional, you know, psychological sometimes challenge that you do feel helpless and hopeless, because sometimes you have a hard time getting to the bathroom or feeding yourself hand to mouth. How am I going to get my voice to be heard? And this is a really easy way when people can. And then you can just send them an email, let them know your story. Doesn't have to be long and rocket science and hard and all that. It just needs to reflect the challenges that the audience out there has experienced, just like you and I have, and your husband and my kids. We were told at our first pediatrician before I got diagnosed, every time I'd call or go in, that it was a virus. Here's a prescription. If they're not better in 3 days, fill it and call me.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, when do they start getting better? How do I do that? So I just want people out there to know, like Kris Newby and myself and my family and her husband, we all started where people are out there. Square one, not understanding what to do or how to do it. But that's a really great start, is awareness and talking about the problem that you've experienced out there. And there's a lot of us who are trying to, you know, make this problem go away, but it's going to take all of us communicating. I just spoke with, well, he's legislator here in Texas, is all I'll say right now, because we're still in conversations about it. But you know, he said all the time, I hear there's no Lyme in Texas. Patients aren't telling us that there's a problem. So how are we going to fix it? And you know, that's just not good enough. It's just not good enough, guys. So we've got to talk. If you can type on Facebook to your support groups, you can type on a website and just let them know I'm sick and I'm not able to get the help I need or the insurance coverage I need for what's working. If acne can get a year's worth of antibiotics, a cousin of syphilis should be also. And helping to prevent this from becoming a generational disease with congenital Lyme would be a really great start.
I'd like to compare it to AIDS. I mean, AIDS was identified in the same year as Lyme was, 81, 82. The AIDS NIH research is 100 times what Lyme disease is. And now those people with a previously fatal disease can go, because of the research that's gone into drug cocktails, they can go on to lead a fairly normal life. Versus Lyme disease, we don't even get acknowledgement that we have a real chronic disease. And everyone agrees that if we had a good test like they do in AIDS, that works from the very beginning, there would be no issue. There would be no controversy about chronic Lyme. You
That's
would
right.
treat it with a very simple, inexpensive, like $10 dose of antibiotics, and you could move on with your life and never think about it again. Instead, we, after 35, 37 years, we have no accurate test, unlike AIDS. They're starving the research budget, and they're denying that these patients even have a disease. So we can do better. We can do better.
We certainly can. It's 2021 and just turned February 2021. And so it's early in the year into that Lyme increase for appropriations that we helped the Center for Lyme Action get. I'm a senior advocate with them, and I think they're doing a great job. We're starting to compete with, dare I say, the pharmaceutical world and the insurance world. These people have huge budgets for lobbying, where, we're really grassroots here. This is patients and donors and fundraisers for these great organizations who are helping to fund Center for Lyme Action, and Bay Area Lyme, who's spearheaded that with Cohen's and I think it was Project Lyme. But these foundations are doing a great job. I started one not that long ago because I didn't like what I was seeing in Texas, and we need to have better representation of making sure that patients' voices are being heard. And I think it's really great what's happening out there. We advocate at Texas Lyme Alliance for a treatment because it's the number one thing that's going to help my kids if they end up needing further treatment down the road. And congenital Lyme and pediatric Lyme kids they're the highest infection rate in this population. So we have to help the kids, and we have to help them have a treatment. So that's why I'm pushing to get information out for a safer use for disulfiram. I never recommend that it's going to be a silver bullet or a good treatment for anyone. I never recommend a doctor, a clinic, or a treatment. I advocate for all of it because at some point in time, the right combination is going to cross our path, and it's going to be put out in your newest movie or newest book. And I know you're so brilliant about how you write these truths around science and this pandemic, because it is world over, that something's going to kick and it's going to hit just the right button at just the right time. And I think it's going to be really powerful. 2020 we've got $91 million now in Lyme appropriations budgeted for Lyme disease this year. We're advocating now for another increase in 2022. I probably won't get this edited fast enough in order to encourage people to sign up at centerforlymeaction.org on their events tab by Friday. But anything that people can do to take part in helping legislation and getting new researchers into this is hitting again on what you were saying about this old dogma of suppressing science and using the term post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome as a diagnosis. It's not a diagnosis. It's a falsity.
I think commenting on articles that continue to spread the big lies about Lyme disease. There was long haul COVID article last week in the New York Times, and they used the PTLDS acronym.
Oh no.
Yeah, so just like threw the article down. But it is, to be fair, it is really hard for a journalist to dive into the Lyme world and know where the truth is, because the people with the power have the megaphones. And it's just so confusing when you start going online, and these patients, they just seem a little crazy and wacky and angry, oh, I think I'll believe the people from Yale and Harvard instead. So you can see how they can write a little bit about it and say, whoa, this is too hot to handle. I'll move on to something less controversial.
Yeah, I can't
ruining
them, but geez.
Yeah, so that's, I'm sort of, the Lyme thing has been exhausting. It wouldn't have been the path I chose for my writing career at all. But once I'm into it, I feel like I've gained a certain level of understanding of everything that's going on, and I'm better equipped to explain it than other people. So I hope by sharing this information, I raise the level of journalism to correctly characterize what's going on.
Yeah, you definitely do. And I wanted to also mention that that's like the second article now that I've heard come out of the New York Times that's conflated the fact that there's science suppression going on and denying persistence.
Mhm.
It's a real problem, and journalism and the media, uh, has to do their part to investigate on their own, not listen to what they're being told or what's at the top of the surface. They need to go a little bit deeper into looking at the details as to where it came from, who's maybe owning patents there on the ELISA test, that kind of stuff, because those are the real facts that we need to keep talking about. Man, thanks so much for bringing all that up, because it is really a science issue that became overly politicized in a polarizing way
Mhm.
versus just sticking to the darn science. I mean, it's
Right.
really not hard to just look at all of these studies on persistence that prove, just like syphilis or anything else that persists like that. Uh, it's a science issue, so it's got to be solved through the science, in my opinion. You agree?
Ag- Absolutely. Absolutely. And the science is out there. It's just being cherry picked by the IDSA guidelines people.
I agree 100%. So, I would love to have been saying this for probably 3 years, and maybe someday I'll say it to the right person who can do something about it. Not pointing at you. Um, but the Bayh-Dole Act. Do you know much about that? That sucker needs to go away or be washed and cleaned and refurbished and recycled and, spit back out in the way that it's actually going to help patients. How do you feel about that?
Um, I I think it's funding our research institutions, since it provides like a conduit of money from pharma to the research institution. It's not going away. For people who don't know about that act, it just said that research institutions and the researchers can share in the royalties for scientific discoveries that end up being turned into treatments, diagnostics, and cures. And it really, in my film, I talk about this, but um, it it meant that if you had a dangerous new disease and you discovered like a new treatment or a diagnostic, you've partnered with big pharma, and all of a sudden that discovery became intellectual property and it had to be hidden and kept secret. So you didn't have the sharing of this information with other scientists that could exponentially increase the rate of advancement. So I think it slowed down science a lot in the name of profits.
That's right.
Uh, so
Conflicts of interest
conflicts
is
of interest. Yeah.
yeah,
So
summation of all of this trouble is there are too many conflicts of interest allowed where it should have never been allowed, and that's in the best interest of our healthcare system. If it's not allowed in banking or other industries, why is it allowed in the healthcare industry that's dictating how fast or whether we ever do recover from these chronic infections?
and if you look at the new Lyme treatment guidelines that were published in 2020, a lot of those lead authors on that are involved in this malpractice lawsuit.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and
It's
and
subversitory
that is definitely conflict, because they are going to do everything they can to protect their view of the disease, which is it's easy to treat, easy to cure, and it's not chronic, and to save their bacon on malpractice suits. So how can that not be a conflict? How can you allow that happen? I think you can have researchers in the lab who partner with pharma, and that's called translational research, pushing out cures and diagnostics. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
you can't then be the leaders in recommending those tests and treatments if you're profiting from them. So that's the key distinction. Choose your lane, but you can't have it all because that is a conflict of interest and it's harming science.
It is harming science, and it's really sad. The two things that I learned from working with Jenna Luce there over the years, transparency and accountability, that has to be at the forefront of science, and anything that is around science, whether it's government interaction, insurance interaction, pharmaceutical interaction, or the medical societies and communities. It has to be transparency and accountability. If you have to hide somewhere that this research is being conflated as truth or even false, then you should be able to talk about it publicly and show people where you get this from and what science and transparency and accountability in science has to be brought back to the forefront of research, because it's political, it's about money, it's about conflicts of interest. That Bayh-Dole Act has to be amended, is the right word. Some way, somehow, that has to be done. I call on all legislators for years now. Something has to be done with allowing conflicts of interest within our research and medical world, because that's what's keeping people sick. And that's how we end up getting a crappy test and a crappy vaccine and no treatments and a harmful term like PTLDS that's blocking the access to care.
I think one thing that's been heartening about the COVID pandemic is how all the scientists rallied and pushed out their research early on, and shared it early on because of the urgency of that. And we had a glimpse of a world without that act, because it was sharing and it wasn't protecting patents and taking your time to get things through the very Byzantine FDA approval process. So hopefully the COVID pandemic will break through some of these traffic barriers to making progress in science.
I believe it 100%. I really do. I've been talking to people that I work with and advocate with, that trying to find strategies and how we can all come together to make that happen, because this is such a deadlier disease than Lyme disease. Of course, you can keel over with being undiagnosed from something like Lyme carditis and not even knowing that you have Lyme disease, and it affect the heart like that. But with COVID, there's so many people dying so quickly that they really pushed the science to the envelope. And I'm just so grateful for all those researchers that have put science first and called out when people aren't. And of course, all the health heroes out there, we have to thank them. And hats off to every single one of them who are, putting their job before their family is something, I am totally against in my own home. But man, oh man, is that fantastic what these people have done around COVID. And I just encourage so many people out there who might see this as an avenue, I think is what you're saying, a path for getting the right help and following what has been achieved in COVID so quickly, that we can do this for Lyme disease. And so many people are. I like to always end on a positive note in my interviews. And I think that's a really great thing is that maybe we can all, God bless all those families that have lost loved ones to COVID and Lyme as well. But maybe we can utilize some of this as a good thing, or the silver lining to a really awful and tragic situation in both regards, Lyme and COVID, that maybe we can cross this, research threshold of inflammation, whether, it's a virus or, Borrelia or babesiosis or Rocky Mountain spotted fever. It doesn't matter to a patient. It matters that we get the right research so that we can get the right help.
And also the acknowledgement that there are long haul diseases. I feel like a lot of physicians say, well, you've had antibiotics, you're cured, but to really acknowledge what patients are going through when you wake up sick every day and have to go about living in a normal life, and the stigma associated with that too.
It's such an unraveling of other diseases, I think, because as we all know, something that's family, extended family member recently just got diagnosed with, this is just a for instance, but Hodgkin's lymphoma at 16 years old, stage 4. Okay. This kid has got, an uphill battle. But as we all know, one of the leading causes that we've learned in science is Epstein-Barr. Well, this is one of those viruses that may not be a direct co-infection of something like Lyme disease, but some of these people in this Epstein-Barr group who have had Hodgkin's lymphoma are also Lyme disease patients, diagnostically, proven.
Mhm.
So, I challenge science and I challenge researchers and I challenge patients even to be their own hero and advocate and, send this message, learn from these books like Kris Newby's Bitten and Under Our Skin movie, and send it to your family members and legislators and keep digging.
Thank you so much for
So
inviting me.
great.
I haven't talked about the conflicts for a while, but they're still there.
Last but not least, what else are you working on?
I have a really a fantastic article coming out on Bartonella, which is cat scratch fever,
Great.
which is a co-infection of a lot of Lyme people. It's a patient story, a 14-year-old boy who gets sudden psychosis, and the whole medical establishment writes him off as having schizophrenia, and you just need to institutionalize him for the rest of his life and keep him drugged up. And it was just about a really heroic dad who kept on pushing and just found his way to noticing the Bartonella tracks, which look like cat scratches and or stretch marks, and making his way to a diagnosis. And that child now is successfully in college and doing great. So that was a fantastic story. So I hope that'll be coming out in a month or so. Also, there's a very talented film producer, a couple of them, working on making Bitten a TV series.
Oh my God, that's
So
amazing.
yeah, so
Yay, you.
yeah, I know. So hopefully getting a film out is really, really hard. I know. So hopefully that will see the light of day soon.
That's fantastic. Congratulations
Oh,
and a
thanks.
big fat hug for all the work that you do for patients. So, where can people buy your book for now? And I'm going to keep, maybe we'll meet again later when your other stuff comes out with this series. We can talk about that as well. But where can people get your book now?
So any place you buy books, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, from the publisher HarperCollins. It's on audio and Kindle versions because I know a lot of Lyme people have trouble reading the written word. So,
Me too.
and of course, I always say support your local indie bookstores because we really don't want them to go away.
Yes.
So that's where to go. And then the film Under Our Skin is still available. Like I said, Amazon Prime, you can watch it for free. It really, I think, does a good job of explaining the patient experience, which is really important if you're trying to get your loved ones, your father-in-law who's an infectious disease doctor, to understand what you're going through, right?
The after effects of the psychological impact with medical PTSD is, watch for that one. That could be another whole series on the psychological effects of being told you're not sick and being diagnosed and underdiagnosed for decades and decades. How children come from those homes feeling abandoned and traumatized by their own experience and sometimes have it themselves. We're not crazy. We have an infection. I was told to go work out. Well, I had a gym for 14 years. That didn't cure me. I was told, we don't understand why you have anxiety. Go do a year of psychological medication for anxiety and depression, along with a year of, counseling. I started and I said, how long does this take? She said, I'd give it a year. So I said, okay, we're going to do it a year. for insurance to pay, I had to do both. I said, okay, once again, still didn't cure me. I got sicker, right? And then I couldn't function because those drugs, I can't tolerate a lot of that stuff. So
Yeah.
I've done all this stuff that they say to go do, and it doesn't work. But getting to the root cause and a good diagnostic tool, that works.
Right. Yeah. Early diagnosis, we don't have this long hauler disease, and then better treatments. So you can manage it like AIDS patients, right? Or get rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll scale a wall. Will you scale a wall with me like the AIDS patients did and act up? I think that's the only thing I can think of we haven't done in the Lyme community is scale the wall to, what was it? The CDC, did they?
Yeah.
What was that too? I think it was the CDC, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, it's crazy. It's crazy talk. I'm not scaling no wall. I hope your husband continues to heal and that you guys both stay well, and God bless y'all.
Well, thanks. And thank you for going above and beyond and helping patients. So I appreciate that. I have my own website with pictures from my book if you want to look at the crazy Cold War bioweapons experiments. And that's www.krisnewby.com.
You have a great rest of your day.
Okay,
And thanks
you
again
too.
for your time, Kris. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.